General Jeff Sessions in the hot seat today. It's what we've been covering on Fox News Channel for about the last hour or so. They are going to go do a procedural vote there, and the House Judiciary Committee stepping away along with the Attorney General while that happens, and we anticipate that they will come back and resume the hearing now. A lot of questions, and you saw it getting so testy there. This is the kind of intensity that we've been watching for hours as Democrats particularly try to press in with Attorney General Jeff Sessions, sometimes in a very intense manner, to try to see if they can get at the heart of whether or not he had meetings with Russians and whether or not there were people on the Trump campaign that did. At one point, he answered the question quite directly and said, "Are you accusing me of lying?" I want to bring in right now Republican Congressman Louis Gohmert of Texas, a member of that House Judiciary Committee. And you just got out of the hearing. I have to say that the tone of this at times was tough.
Well, yeah, it's certainly been tough, and that's where these hearings often go. But it is important to point out they keep going back, the Democrats, to his initial testimony, and the question involved as part of the campaign. And he did not meet with any Russians as part of the campaign. He's right; he was being truthful. All of us meet with foreign ambassadors. In fact, just within the last hour, I have met with a leading official from one of our African countries, and I consider her a good friend. And anyway, but if somebody were to say, well, Louis, have you met with anybody from Africa as part of your campaign, I would immediately say no, and it would not occur to me to bring up something that was part of my official duties here and not part of a campaign.
I would
so
point
I think
out
Jeff is doing everything he can to be truthful, but naturally he's getting beat up quite a bit.
I would point out that there are no nations that we know of right now that have been accused of meddling in any presidential elections here in the United States. I hear the point that you're making. I do want to press in with this, though, because there were opportunities for other things, and I call them opportunities because this seemed to go in every single direction. A little bit of news made today because one of the lawmakers asked about Judge Roy Moore down in Alabama and wanted to get Attorney General Sessions on the record about what he thinks about that. Sessions got on the record and said he believes the accusers. What was the mood in the room? The accusers of Roy Moore and sexual misconduct allegations. You got that election that's coming up. What was the mood in the room, and what was your take on it?
Well, I don't know. It didn't seem to get a reaction from anybody in the room. And I think, if I heard correctly, he said, I don't have any reason to disbelieve them. And that's from a personal standpoint. But as he said, this is a state matter, and those would potentially be state charges. And he correctly notes that's not something the federal government would get involved in. But I would submit, though, when you bring up charges 38 years later, I mean, I've prosecuted rape, I've sentenced many rapists to prison. It is just an absolutely horrendous crime. But we also allow into evidence how quickly you had outcry. That can go to the jury. And when somebody waits 38 years, I can't imagine a jury not being completely suspicious. Yes, we understand there's all kinds of pressure. It's tough to bring these things up. But to wait 38 years right before an election, it does raise really interesting questions. Anybody could accuse you of something 38 years ago, and Harris, you're not going to be able to find witnesses that will establish exactly where you were at that moment. If they had raised allegations within months, then you could, and I'm sure Roy Moore could find, okay, was I in somebody's court at that time? But you bring it up 38 years later and say, here are the specifics. Well, people don't remember back 38 years specifics to counter. So I think it's grossly unfair.
Okay, so that came up at this hearing, though, as a question, and you saw Attorney General Sessions answer that. Let's go on now. Representative Issa at one point was kind of putting this out there, too, for the Attorney General in terms of how you meet with people along the way. You gave one example. Issa gave another. What is the significance right now, though, do you think, of being able to talk with Sessions again about Russia But at the same time, Republicans bringing up this idea of, okay, do you hire a special counsel to look into Hillary Clinton and Uranium One deal? That sort of thing. I mean, do you think that that's been brought up in a way that you think is substantive to move the ball forward?
Well, I was in a meeting with the African official for a moment, so I didn't hear everything, but I don't think it's been adequately brought up. And I'll just give you a heads up, and I haven't talked about this with anybody from the Justice Department. If there's somebody watching, then they'll probably give the AG a heads up. But Harris, I've got a copy here of a motion to seal. This is in a case involving an individual involved in the Russian efforts to obtain U.S. uranium. And this is a motion to seal the search warrants, arrest warrants, criminal complaint, the affidavits involved in the case. And this is to prevent those matters that Bob Mueller, as head of the FBI, and Rod Rosenstein, as U.S. Attorney, had investigated that really should have brought the whole purchase of uranium to an absolute end until they could be completely sure that Russia had nothing to do and could not possibly get that uranium. And let me tell you, Harris, right here on the signature line, it's respectfully submitted, Rod J. Rosenstein, United States Attorney. It's signed by Adam Akey for Rod Rosenstein. Rosenstein and Mueller are in this up to their eyeballs.
So wait a minute.
So whether we have to get another special counsel or not, it certainly cannot be Bob Mueller and Rod Rosenstein. They need to be out of the picture.
Look, I know you got to go back in after this vote, so I want to drill down on what you've just shown me, because this is pertinent to the hearing that's going on. I would imagine it'll come up. The motion to seal on Uranium One deal. Tell me again the timing of this, and we'll have to bring you back because I know you've got to go.
Yeah. This is August 18, 2014 is when this motion to seal was filed, and it prevents people from knowing how bad the information was about Russia trying to get our uranium.
Thank you. We're going to get cut off. We'll bring you back.
All right. Thank you.
A school shooting in California to tell you about now, and we're just getting information in. The hard facts are these. Authorities in Northern California, Tehama County, the sheriff's department there, reporting that 3 people are dead in a shooting in rural Northern California. The shooter killed after also wounding children at the school. Tehama County Sheriff's Office says multiple victims, multiple shots at this elementary school. Some reports have it near the school, but we can tell you right now that the superintendent has arrived there. A spokesperson from that office is also there at the school. The number of deceased by law enforcement is what's being confirmed right now. We're getting some details, too, about the victims at the school, but we don't have their ages outside of the fact that we believe that they were students at the school. As we learn more about this, of course, we'll bring it to you. This Northern California situation has been playing out for about 25 minutes or so. We started getting some details into our newsroom, and as we hunt down the story and get people, put our reporting assets in place and our journalists there, these are some of the details that are coming. Rancho Tehama School is the name of it. And they are calling this still an active shooting. However, some of the details that I gave you already are that 3 people are reported dead and several wounded. As we get more information about this, we'll bring it to you. This is Northern California, a rural area. You see there on the map. We're working the story, and we'll bring you more info as we get it.
Change your testimony that was where you said I have no knowledge of any such conversations by anyone connected to the Trump campaign regarding Russians involved in the campaign. I will
The witness will answer the question.
Yes or no? Does he want to change his testimony in the Intelligence Committee?
I would just say this. I stand by this testimony at the Intelligence Committee. I have never met with or had any conversation with any Russians or any foreign officials concerning any type of interference with the campaign or election.
So you know they're on a little bit of a break right now. Attorney General Jeff Sessions testifying today for the fourth time on what he may have known about the Trump campaign's possible contacts with Russia. Sessions says he has always been consistent in what he has told Congress. Joining us now is Steve Hayes, editor-in-chief of the Weekly Standard and a Fox News contributor. And Steve, this has been a very intense time. You've seen lawmakers go in a lot of different directions, but I want to ask you specifically about this line of questioning and how you think Jeff Sessions is doing in terms of answering it.
Yeah, I think there's a contradiction at the heart of what he's saying today. He said in his initial statement that he has never changed his story, and then Representative Jackson Lee, I think, was sort of obnoxious and badgering as she asked him the question. But Representatives Swalwell and Jeffries, I think, were much more effective when they just asked him to explain the fact set, because it's apparent that his story has changed over time. And I thought he struggled to explain exactly how and why his story has changed.
You know, we have a little bit of that back and forth with Jeffries. And you know, Representative Hakeem Jeffries of New York had asked about specifically if he had talked with anybody. And Jeff Sessions said, well, nobody should be prosecuted for answering as I did and as I have. I'm going to ask my team if we can go back to it and roll a little bit of that portion of the hearing now from Jeff Sessions.
I've always tried to answer the questions fairly and accurately. But to ask, did you ever do something, do you ever meet with Russians and deal with the campaign? You're saying Mr. Carter Page, who left that meeting, according to the press reports, and I guess his deposition or interview has been reported as saying, I'm going to Russia. I made no response to him, didn't acknowledge it. And you're accusing me of lying about that? I say that's not fair, Mr. Jeffries.
Steve?
Yeah, look, I think you can make the case, if you're Jeff Sessions, that your story's never changed, or that these are the reasons that your story's has changed. You can't make both of those arguments at the same time, and I think that's what he tried to do today. Now, look, there's a deep irony, of course, in some of the questioning. Democrats, after 8 years of giving a pass to the Obama administration, are suddenly interested in the politicization of law enforcement and intelligence bureaucracies. That's fair. That's not whataboutism. That's a fair criticism of the way Democrats conducted themselves today. And people watching this at home, I think, would be right to say, gosh, these Democrats are awfully selective in their outrage. But it doesn't obscure the fact that Jeff Sessions, I think, had a difficulty reconciling these two arguments that he was making at the same time that are in many ways mutually contradictory.
Can I just ask you, I mean, the American public, they're seeing this, they're seeing him time and time again. The questions don't sound all that different. I mean, is the ball moving forward at all on this? And what's next for Attorney General Jeff Sessions after today?
Yeah, I think the ball has moved. I mean, I think we've heard, as we heard today, and as we've read in news accounts, and as Harris, as you and I talked about on the couch last week, there have been revisions to the story from George Papadopoulos, from Carter Page, and others, from Corey Lewandowski, people who had to update what they had previously said about their contacts with Russians and what they were up to. Because of those revisions, you're getting questions like the ones we saw from the Democrats today in this hearing. So the ball is advancing in public, I think, slowly and incrementally. We're learning more. You're having people either explain why they didn't remember things.
But does any of it point to anything that went on between the Trump campaign and Russia? That's the point, right?
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, the final answer is, at this point, we don't know. There is so much.
Is this how you get the answer? Asking the same man the same questions over and over?
I think these are different questions than they were asking him
You
before.
do?
I think they were asking him to reconcile what he had said before with what we've learned since. And as I say, I think he struggled to do that. But I don't think we're likely to have the truth emerge from these kinds of hearings when you have the kind of political grandstanding that we saw from both Republicans and Democrats in this hearing. This is what congressional hearings are often all about. It's far more an exercise in speechifying and chest thumping than it is in fact-finding.
Speechifying. Okay. Steve Hayes, thank you very much. We appreciate your time. We will be right back. We're staying on this hearing. They have left to go make a vote. The House Judiciary Committee is set to come back, and Attorney General Jeff Sessions will continue to answer questions. You saw one of the people come out and join us at the top of the hour, Representative Louis Gohmert from Texas. He says he wants to ask all about documents that he has on Democrats and the Uranium One deal. So there's more to come. Stay tuned. All right. right, so we have been watching the Attorney General of the United States testifying on Capitol Hill before the House Judiciary Committee, and we know full well that they are out on recess for a quick vote, so they could come back at any time. I want to talk about the news that's being made again. Let's bring in a new guest, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General under President George W. Bush, Tom Dupree. Tom, I'm being expeditious here in case we have to go back. I want to ask you about something that Representative Louis Gerhardt brought up from Texas, and it has to do with that Uranium One deal. I haven't seen that motion to seal, but if you've been watching, you know he mentioned it. Your thoughts?
Well, I think it's intriguing, and it sounds like what the congressman was suggesting is that there may be people, including the Deputy Attorney General, who had prior involvement in this case, and for that reason, in the congressman's view, maybe they need to step aside. I think it's an interesting argument. I think we want to see what that motion the congressman was talking about actually says. But look, at the end of the day, if the Deputy Attorney General thinks that his ability to supervise an investigation into the uranium deal independently without bias has been compromised or could be questioned, I'm fully confident he would step aside and do the right thing if it came to that.
All right, that's a lot of faith. At one point, and we'll cover the news as it happens on it, Representative DeSantis of Florida asked the Attorney General during the hearing about recusing himself from the Russian investigation, and there were some details, some turning point about, you know, if it had been criminal and not a broader national security, would that have changed your idea about not recusing yourself? What was the significance? What's the takeaway from that we need to understand?
Well, I think his question basically was, why were you recusing yourself? And if the stakes were lower or if the stakes were different, would you have made the same judgment you did? Look, it's an open secret that the president was not thrilled with the Attorney General's decision to recuse himself here. And I think what a lot of people on the Hill are trying to do is to give the Attorney General various hypothetical scenarios that really try to tease out the reason why he made the decision he did to step back.
Why is that important? How would it change things?
Well, one possibility is if the stakes were lower, if it was a garden variety case, maybe either he thinks it's more important to recuse myself because if it's a very important case, then the Attorney General's impartiality can't be questioned. If it's a garden variety case, maybe it's not quite as important. I'm not quite sure I see the logic there, but I suspect that's what they were going at.
All right. A lot of news being made this hour, and we're hitting on it with different people at different points. We're looking at an empty room still, but we know they are coming back after this vote. Tom Dupree, thank you very much for your time. Attorney General Sessions fielding questions about the salacious Trump dossier. Does it go beyond opposition research? And was the way it was funded illegal? Remember, we're finding about money flowing from the DNC, Hillary Clinton, blah, blah, blah. Our power panel joins us next to talk about that. Stay close. Fox News Alert, keeping our eye on when that hearing with Attorney General Jeff Sessions reconvenes. Right now, the chamber is empty. When it reconvenes, of course, we'll bring it to you live. Let's talk about the news that's being made, though. Jessica Tarlov is here, Senior Director of Research for Bustle.com, and back from the Outnumbered couch. Must be exhausted. That was quite a battle. Jonah Goldberg, Senior Editor for the National Review. Both are Fox News contributors. Your thoughts after what you've seen?
I think, look, at the end of the day, it seems to me that what Jeff Sessions went into this to do was not make any news. And I think he had a pretty successful outing in that regard. There were some contradictions, but nothing that really is a bombshell.
You mean in terms of Russia?
In terms of Russia.
Okay, Jessica?
Yeah, well, we talked in the green room. You thought that the biggest piece of news was what he said about Roy Moore. I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah.
But yeah, there has been no bombshell here. People who think that he lied about what he knew about Russia and Papadopoulos and Carter Page still think that. You know, you recall things now you didn't before, but we've seen people on both sides of the aisle doing that. I would like less partisan nitpicking. I would like focus on what we're supposed to be talking about.
Well, and nitpicking, I mean, the Democrats have they've been doing total gymnastics moves. I mean, you saw a lot of things come up. You saw, and not that they're not important issues, but the venue for a lot of the race-related things that were coming up.
It's a huge issue for people about
venue
Jeff
when
Sessions.
you're also trying to get answers about Russia. But I understand that's how it works.
They're all shopping for sound bites on their web pages and for their newsletters, and that's about it.
Well, but these are important issues.
Oh,
right?
they
So
are.
just might not
They
be
are
the right
generally
venue.
at this moment.
All right.
If you have him sitting there, I'd go Russia, Russia, Russia personally. But
All right,
I'm
we'll be
not in
right back.
Congress.